18 meters below a patch of dry scrubland in southeastern Romania, there is air that would kill you. Not slowly, not in an hour, in minutes. The oxygen down there sits at roughly half of what your lungs are built for. Carbon dioxide runs about 100 times higher than the air you are breathing right now. And threaded through all of it is hydrogen sulfide, the gas that gives rotten eggs their smell, dissolving into warm, milky pools that have never once reflected sunlight. For 5.5 million years, nothing from the surface got in. No light, no rain, no air, no animal, nothing. And yet something down there is alive. Before we go any further, I want you to do something. Down in the comments, tell me what you think scientists found when they finally broke into this cave in 1986. Not what you hoped they found. What you actually think was waiting in the dark after 5.5 million years of total isolation. I read them. And if this is your kind of thing, sealed places, locked doors, the parts of this planet we were never meant to reach, subscribe, because there is a lot more of this coming. Now let me show you what they found, because almost nobody guesses it correctly. The story starts with a mistake. In 1986, survey crews were working near Mangalia, a port city a few kilometers from the Black Sea coast, looking for ground solid enough to build a power plant on. Standard procedure: sink test shafts, check the limestone, make sure the earth can carry what you intend to put on top of it. They dug an artificial shaft down into the rock, and at the bottom of it, they hit a void. A Romanian speleologist named Cristian Lascu went down to look. What he found was not impressive. Movile is not a cathedral of stone. There are no vast chambers, no spectacular formations, nothing you would put on a postcard. It is small, narrow, clay-lined crawlways dropping steeply into the dark. But the moment his light hit the walls, the air told him something was wrong. Or rather, something was different. It was thick, sulfurous, warm, 21 degrees Celsius, constant, humidity sitting at 100%, and no detectable air movement at all. Nothing was stirring down there. Nothing had stirred down there for a very long time. And then he found the water. At the lowest point of the cave, there is a lake. The lake room, they call it now. The water is warm and clouded, and it rises up out of a deep thermal aquifer, carrying dissolved hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia with it from somewhere much further down. But the lake room is not the strange part. The strange part is what lies past it. The passages beyond the lake are completely flooded, submerged. To get any deeper into Movile, you cannot walk and you cannot climb. You have to dive into warm, opaque, sulfurous water in almost zero visibility through narrow, flooded rock. And then, in a few places, the ceiling of those drowned galleries rises and traps a pocket of air. They are called air bells. Think about what an air bell actually is. It is a bubble of atmosphere sealed under stone and underwater that has been sitting in place for millions of years. To reach one, a diver swims through the flooded passage in the dark, surfaces inside a chamber, and takes the regulator out of their mouth to breathe air that is 1 to 2% methane, up to 3.5% carbon dioxide, and as little as 7% oxygen. There are only 2 of these bells that researchers work in with any regularity: Air Bell 1, Air Bell 2. And the water inside them is not clear. It is covered in a film, a pale, wrinkled, floating mat, up to 2 centimeters thick, held up from underneath by bubbles of methane rising out of the water. Now, when this was first described, The assumption made about it was completely reasonable and completely wrong. The assumption was that the film was debris, dead organic material that had washed down from the surface at some point in the deep past, feeding whatever was still clinging on below. Because that is how caves work. Every cave ecosystem anyone had ever documented worked that way. Caves are not productive places, they are dependent places. Food falls in from above, leaves, flood debris, bat guano, and the cave lives on whatever the surface hands down. But Movile is sealed. Nothing falls in. And the numbers refuse to add up. There was far too much life in that cave for a place surviving on 5 million-year-old leftovers. So a researcher named Serban Sarbu set out to find where the food was actually coming from. What he found rewrote the rules. That floating film is not debris. It is alive. It is a dense mat of bacteria, archaea and fungi, and it is not eating anything that came from the surface. It is building food out of chemistry. Here is why that matters more than it sounds. Almost every ecosystem on the surface of this planet runs on photosynthesis. A leaf catches a photon of sunlight, splits a water molecule, locks carbon into sugar, and that sugar climbs the food chain. Into an insect, into a bird, into you. Take the sun away, and within a few years, nearly every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth collapses. Movile does not need the sun. The bacteria in those mats pull their energy out of oxidizing hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia, the exact poisons rising out of the aquifer. They use that energy to fix carbon. They are manufacturing food out of toxic gas. That was the finding. Movile Cave was the first land-based ecosystem ever discovered that is built from the bottom up on chemosynthesis instead of sunlight. And once you understand the base of that food chain, the animals start to make sense. Snails and nematode worms graze the mats directly, scraping the film off the water and off the wet walls. Above them sit the predators, and this is where 5.5 million years of isolation shows its hand. There is a water scorpion in Movile called Nepa anophthalma. On the surface, water scorpions are ambush hunters. They sit still, they watch, they grab. This one has no eyes at all. Evolution took them back. It is the first aquatic bug of its kind ever found living permanently underground. There is a leech, Hemopis caica, that has never encountered a single ray of light in its entire evolutionary history. There is Acellus aquaticus infernus, a subterranean form of a common surface isopod, pale, blind, cut off from its relatives above for so long that it is now something else entirely. And in 2020, researchers described a centipede from the cave that had been misidentified for decades. Everyone assumed it was Cryptops anomalans, an ordinary species found all over Europe. It was not. Genetic work on mitochondrial and nuclear markers showed it was new. Cryptops speleorex, bigger body, elongated limbs, enlarged spiracles, serrated teeth on the last pair of legs. The name translates to something close to the king of the cave, and it sits at the very top of the Movile food web. The current count is 51 invertebrate species inside that cave. 35 of them exist nowhere else on Earth. Almost every one of them has lost its pigment. Most have lost their eyes completely, which makes a small, foul-smelling cave under a Romanian field one of the most species-rich cave systems ever documented anywhere. And that is when the space agencies started paying attention. Because if you are searching for life beyond Earth, you have a problem. Almost everywhere worth looking, there is no sunlight to speak of. Under the ice shell of Europa, under the ice of Enceladus, in whatever water might still be trapped below the surface of Mars. If life requires photosynthesis, then every one of those places is dead by definition. Movile is the counter-argument. It is a functioning, stable, complex ecosystem. Grazers, predators, a complete food web, running entirely on chemical energy in total darkness in an atmosphere that would kill a human being for 5.5 million years without a single interruption. Researchers have hauled mobile laboratories out to Mangalia specifically to study Movile as an analog for exactly those environments, not as a metaphor, as a working model. It is the closest thing we have on this planet to standing inside Europa, which brings us to the part that is still not settled. Nobody is entirely certain how the animals got down there. The cave sealed in the late Miocene, roughly 5.5 million years ago. And the clean version of the story is simple. The ancestors of everything in Movile were trapped when the door closed, and their descendants have been evolving in the dark ever since. But the genetics are messier than that. One snail species in the cave looks like it has been isolated for closer to 2 million years, not 5. And the bacteria, while genuinely ancient, appear related to lineages found in other places, including deep-sea hydrothermal vents on the other side of the world. So either the seal was never quite as perfect as it looks, or life found its way back in later through the aquifer and adapted all over again from scratch. Movile is protected now. Access is tightly controlled. Only a few dozen researchers have ever been permitted down, because the ecosystem is fragile enough that the visitors themselves are the contamination risk. Every single descent has to be justified. Romania has put it forward for World Heritage status. 18 meters under a field near the Black Sea, behind a locked door and a shaft that a construction crew dug by accident, there is a bubble of poisoned air where life has been running on chemistry alone since before our own ancestors came down out of the trees. We opened it in 1986. We still are not sure what we walked into. Now go back to those comments and tell me, was it anything close to what you guessed?